The November rain fell steadily on Ridgewood, North Carolina, turning the unpaved road to Margaret Eleanor Hayes's trailer into a muddy mess. At 68 years old, Margaret sat at her small kitchen table, staring at the eviction notice that had arrived 3 days earlier. The paper trembled in her weathered hands, not from fear, but from the arthritis that had been worsening over the past year. Outside, the wind howled through the gaps in the trailer's aluminum siding, a sound she had grown accustomed to over the past 18 months since her daughter, Patricia Hayes Callahan, had abandoned her here. Margaret remembered the day Patricia had driven her to this place with a clarity that still cut deep. "It's temporary, Mom," Patricia had said, her designer sunglasses hiding eyes that wouldn't meet Margaret's, "just until Daniel and I figure out the finances. The house in Charlotte is too small for all of us." That was August of 2023. Margaret hadn't heard from her daughter since Christmas, when Patricia sent a generic card with no return address and a $20 bill tucked inside. The trailer belonged to Patricia's husband's cousin, who had agreed to let Margaret stay rent-free for 6 months. Those 6 months had long expired, and now Gerald Hutchinson, the property owner, wanted his land back. Margaret understood. She wasn't naive. She had tried to find work, but at 68 with a bad hip and limited mobility, no one in Ridgewood was hiring. Her Social Security check of $873 per month covered her medications, utilities, and barely enough food. There was nothing left for rent. Margaret stood slowly, her joints protesting, and walked to the small sewing machine set up in the corner of the living room. It was a Singer from 1978, the one thing she had insisted on bringing from her old life. Over the past few months, she had started taking in alterations from the small bridal shop on Main Street, earning $15 or $20 here and there. Mrs. Chen, the shop owner, was kind, but couldn't afford to pay more. Margaret had managed to save $230 hidden in a coffee can under the sink. It wasn't enough, not even close. The court hearing was scheduled for Monday, November 10th at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Margaret had called the courthouse 3 times, speaking to a clerk named Bethany Morrison, asking if there was any way to request a postponement. Bethany had been professional but firm. Margaret would need to appear before Judge Richard Bradford and plead her case. There were no guarantees. Margaret pulled on her only decent coat, a navy blue wool one she had bought at Goodwill for $12, and prepared to face the rain. She needed to get to the courthouse early to make sure she understood the process. Her son, Thomas Hayes, lived in Seattle and hadn't returned her calls in over a year. Her other daughter, Jennifer Hayes Martinez, was somewhere in Florida last Margaret heard, but the number she had no longer worked. Margaret had accepted the bitter truth. She was alone. The bus stop was half a mile away, and Margaret walked it slowly, her orthopedic shoes squelching in the mud. The rain soaked through her coat by the time she reached the shelter, and she stood there shivering, watching cars pass by without stopping. When the bus finally arrived, the driver, a heavy-set man named Curtis Webb, recognized her from previous trips and didn't ask for the fare. "You take care now, Miss Margaret," he said as she climbed aboard. Small kindnesses like that kept her going. The Ridgewood County Courthouse was an imposing brick building built in 1952, with white columns and a bronze statue of Lady Justice out front. Margaret climbed the steps carefully, holding tight to the wet railing. Inside, the lobby smelled of floor wax and old wood. People moved past her with purpose, lawyers in expensive suits, clerks carrying folders, families huddled together speaking in hushed tones. Margaret felt invisible among them. She found courtroom 3 and sat in the back row of the gallery, watching other cases proceed before hers. Judge Richard Bradford sat elevated on the bench, a man in his mid-50s with silver hair and sharp features. He wore his black robe like armor and spoke with a clipped, impatient tone that made Margaret's stomach tighten. She watched him dismiss a young man's request for a payment plan on traffic fines without even looking up from his papers. The judge's reputation preceded him, known throughout Ridgewood as a hardliner who showed little mercy to those he deemed unworthy of the court's time. When the clerk, a thin woman named Sandra Whitfield, finally called Margaret's name, her voice echoed through the courtroom. Case number 47, 2025, Hutchinson versus Hayes, eviction proceedings. Margaret stood on shaking legs and made her way to the defendant's table. She had no lawyer. She couldn't afford one. Across from her sat Gerald Hutchinson's attorney, a polished man in his 30s named Bradley Foster, who barely glanced in her direction. Judge Bradford looked at Margaret for the first time, his expression unreadable. Mrs. Hayes, you're here to contest the eviction notice filed by Mr. Gerald Hutchinson, is that correct? His tone suggested he had already made up his mind about the outcome. Yes, Your Honor, Margaret said, her voice smaller than she intended. I'm asking for 60 days. Your 60 days to save up enough money to find another place. I have nowhere else to go. The judge leaned back in his chair, studying her with what appeared to be mild amusement. Mrs. Hayes, according to the documents filed, you've been living on Mr. Hutchinson's property for 18 months without paying rent. Is that accurate? Yes, sir, but... And you're asking this court to force Mr. Hutchinson to continue providing you with free housing for another 2 months. Margaret felt her face flush. I'm not asking for free housing, Your Honor. I've been trying to find work, but it's difficult at my age. I do alterations, and I'm starting to get regular customers. If I could just have a little more time. Judge Bradford interrupted her, his voice dripping with condescension. Mrs. Hayes, let me ask you something. How old are you? 68. 68, the judge repeated, as if the number itself was evidence of some personal failing. And in 68 years, you never learned the importance of financial planning, of saving for your retirement. A few people in the gallery chuckled, and Margaret felt her cheeks burn with humiliation. Your Honor, I worked as a nurse for 40 years. I raised 3 children on my own after my husband passed away. I did plan, but clearly not well enough, Mrs. Hayes. Or you wouldn't be standing here asking a property owner to subsidize your lifestyle. The word lifestyle hit Margaret like a physical blow. She thought of the leaking roof in the trailer, the space heater that barely worked, the nights she went to bed hungry to make sure her medications lasted the month. Your Honor, with all due respect, living in a trailer with no heat and a roof that leaks is not a lifestyle choice. It's survival. Judge Bradford's smile faded. Mrs. Hayes, I don't have time for sob stories. This court recognizes property rights. Mr. Hutchinson has been more than generous in allowing you to stay as long as he has. You've had 18 months to figure out your situation, and you've failed to do so. That is not Mr. Hutchinson's problem, nor is it this court's problem. Bradley Foster, sensing victory, stood up. Your Honor, my client has been exceedingly patient. He has his own financial obligations, and he needs the property back. We request immediate eviction with enforcement to begin within 7 days. Margaret's heart pounded. 7 days. Where would she go in 7 days? Your Honor, please. Mrs. Hayes, I'm going to give you some advice, Judge Bradford said, his voice laced with mock kindness. At your age, you might want to consider reaching out to family members or perhaps looking into assisted living facilities that accept charity cases. There are resources available for people in your situation. I've tried contacting my children, Margaret said, her voice breaking. They don't answer, and the shelters in Ridgewood don't have space. I've called. I'm asking for 60 days to work, to save enough to... 60 days to continue being a burden on Mr. Hutchinson. The judge shook his head. Mrs. Hayes, frankly, you're asking this court to reward your lack of responsibility. I see cases like yours every week, people who make poor decisions and then expect others to bail them out. I'm not going to enable that behavior." The courtroom was silent. Margaret felt tears sting her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She had survived too much in her life to break down in front of strangers. "Your Honor, I served my country. I was an army nurse in Vietnam. I saved lives. I worked every day of my adult life. I raised my children alone after my husband died in a construction accident. I am not asking for a handout. I am asking for mercy." Judge Bradford's expression didn't change. "Your military service is commendable, Mrs. Hayes, but it doesn't give you the right to occupy someone else's property without compensation. If you had truly been responsible, you would have planned better for your future. Now, I'm going to grant Mr. Hutchinson's request for immediate eviction. You have 7 days to vacate the premises. If you fail to do so, the Sheriff's Department will remove you and your belongings. This court is adjourned on this matter." He raised his gavel, ready to bring it down, when the heavy wooden doors at the back of the courtroom suddenly swung open. The sound echoed through the room like thunder. Every head turned as a group of men entered, their boots striking the floor in unison. They wore black leather vests over denim jackets, and patches covered their chests and backs, patches that read, "Iron Brotherhood MC, veteran-owned and never forgotten." There were 8 of them, and they moved with the disciplined precision of soldiers. The man leading them was imposing, at least 6'4", with broad shoulders, a grey beard, and eyes that had seen too much. He wore a leather vest with a patch that read President over his heart, and another that read Vietnam 1968-1970. His name patch said Smoke. The courtroom fell into absolute silence. Judge Bradford, his gavel still raised, froze mid-motion, his expression shifting from annoyance to confusion to something that might have been concern. The motorcyclists didn't speak. They simply walked to the front of the gallery and stood in a line behind Margaret, their presence filling the room with an unspoken authority. Vincent "Smoke" O'Reilly, the man at the center, looked directly at Judge Bradford, his voice deep and steady. "Your Honor, my name is Vincent O'Reilly. I'm the president of the Iron Brotherhood Motorcycle Club, Chapter 7, Ridgewood, North Carolina. These men with me are my brothers, all combat veterans. We're here to speak on behalf of Margaret Eleanor Hayes." Judge Bradford lowered his gavel slowly, his face pale. "Mr. O'Reilly, this is highly irregular. Court proceedings don't—" "With respect, Your Honor," Smoke interrupted, his tone polite but unyielding. "You called Mrs. Hayes irresponsible. You mocked her situation. You suggested she's a burden. I think the court needs to know exactly who Margaret Hayes is before you pass judgment on her." Bradley Foster stood up. "Your Honor, this is completely inappropriate. These men have no standing in this case." "Sit down, Counselor," Judge Bradford said quietly, his eyes never leaving Smoke. The judge's usual confidence had evaporated, replaced by wariness. "Mr. O'Reilly, you have 2 minutes to explain why you've interrupted my courtroom." Smoke stepped forward, his boots echoing on the marble floor. He reached into his vest and pulled out a worn photograph, placing it on the defense table in front of Margaret. She looked down at it, her breath catching. It was a photo from 1969, a field hospital in Vietnam, soldiers on stretchers, and a young nurse in blood-stained scrubs, her face exhausted but determined. Margaret barely recognized herself. "Your Honor," Smoke began, "this woman saved my father's life. Captain James Patrick O'Reilly, 1st Air Cavalry Division. He was hit by shrapnel from a mortar attack outside Da Nang on July 12, 1969. He was bleeding out, and the medevac couldn't land because of enemy fire. Lieutenant Margaret Eleanor Thompson, that was her name then. She ran through that fire, dragged my father to cover, and kept him alive for 3 hours until they could get him out." The courtroom was so quiet that Margaret could hear the rain drumming against the windows. Smoke's voice grew stronger. My father came home because of her. He lived another 30 years, got to see me grow up, walk me through my enlistment, meet his grandchildren, and when he passed in 1999, the last thing he told me was to find the nurse who saved him, to make sure she was okay. It took me 26 years, Your Honor, but I found her. And this is how our country treats her. Judge Bradford's face had gone from pale to ashen. Mr. O'Reilly, I didn't know. You didn't ask, Smoke said, his voice hard now. You didn't ask who she was. You didn't ask what she'd done. You just saw an old woman you could push around, someone you could mock to make yourself feel important. That's not justice, Your Honor. That's cruelty. Another veteran stepped forward, a black man in his early 70s with salt and pepper hair. His vest read Vice President, and his name patch said Luther. Luther Jackson spoke with a voice that resonated with authority. Your Honor, I'm Luther Jackson, Vice President of Iron Brotherhood. I served in Vietnam, same time as Margaret. I was wounded in the Tet Offensive, took a bullet in the spine. The nurse who kept me stable during transport was Margaret Hayes. She rode in the helicopter with me, held pressure on my wounds, kept me conscious. I'm standing here today because of her. And you want to throw her on the street? One by one, the veterans behind Margaret began to speak, each sharing a connection to her. Some had served with her. Others had fathers, brothers, or uncles whose lives she had saved or comforted in their final moments. The last to speak was a younger man, maybe 50, with a prosthetic leg visible below his jeans. His name patch read, Danny Miller. Your Honor, I'm not a Vietnam vet, Danny said. I served in Iraq, lost my leg in Fallujah in 2004. When I came back to Ridgewood, I was homeless, addicted, ready to end it. Margaret Hayes found me sleeping behind the Dollar General one night. She brought me food, got me connected with the VA, sat with me through my first AA meeting. She didn't have to do that. She barely knew me, but that's who she is. And if this court evicts her, then this court has failed every value it's supposed to represent. Judge Bradford sat motionless, his hands gripping the edge of the bench. The confidence and arrogance that had defined him moments earlier had completely dissolved. He looked at Margaret, who stood with tears streaming down her face, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. The judge's gaze shifted to the veterans, then to the gallery, where people were wiping their eyes and murmuring in disbelief. Your Honor, Smoke said, his voice softer now. We're not asking you to violate the law. We're asking you to see this woman for who she is. A hero who deserves better than what she's gotten. Give her the 60 days she's asking for. In the meantime, my club will make sure she has what she needs. We'll cover her costs, help her find a place, whatever it takes. She's earned that much. Judge Bradford cleared his throat, visibly struggling to regain his composure. Mr. Foster, what is your client's position on this? Bradley Foster looked uncomfortable, glancing between his notes and the veterans. Your Honor, I would need to consult with Mr. Hutchinson, but given the circumstances, I believe he would be amenable to a 60-day extension. The judge nodded slowly. Mrs. Hayes, this court grants you a 60-day postponement of the eviction order. You will have until January 10, 2026 to vacate the property. In the meantime, I strongly encourage you to work with Mr. O'Reilly and his organization to secure alternative housing. He paused, his voice dropping. And Mrs. Hayes, I apologize for my earlier comments. They were inappropriate and beneath the dignity of this court. Margaret couldn't speak. She nodded, her hands covering her face as the weight of the moment overwhelmed her. Smoke placed a hand on her shoulder, his grip firm and reassuring. We've got you, ma'am, he said quietly. You're not alone anymore. Judge Bradford brought his gavel down, the sound ringing with finality. This court is adjourned. He stood quickly and exited through the side door, leaving the courtroom in stunned silence. The veterans surrounded Margaret, forming a protective circle as people began to approach, some to offer congratulations, others simply to shake her hand or say thank you. As Margaret walked out of the courthouse, flanked by the men of Iron Brotherhood, the rain had stopped, and the late afternoon sun broke through the clouds, casting golden light across the wet streets of Ridgewood. For the first time in 18 months, Margaret Eleanor Hayes felt something she had almost forgotten: hope. The story of what happened in Courtroom 3 spread through Ridgewood like wildfire. By the time Margaret and the Iron Brotherhood veterans left the courthouse, a local reporter named Cassidy Reynolds from the Ridgewood Daily Chronicle was waiting on the front steps, camera in hand. Cassidy was a young woman in her late 20s, ambitious and hungry for stories that mattered. She had been at the courthouse covering a zoning dispute when she heard the commotion from Courtroom 3. "Mrs. Hayes, can I have a moment?" Cassidy called out, rushing toward the group. Smoke stepped between them, his expression guarded. "She's been through enough today," he said firmly. "Give her some space." But Margaret touched Smoke's arm gently. "It's all right," she said, her voice still shaky, but gaining strength. "If people are going to know my business, they might as well know the truth." She turned to Cassidy and nodded. "What do you want to know?" Cassidy's eyes were bright with interest, but there was genuine empathy in her voice. "Mrs. Hayes, what happened in that courtroom today? And who are these men who came to your defense?" Margaret glanced at the veterans standing around her, men who had walked into her life as strangers and emerged as her protectors. "These men," she said slowly, "are reminders that honor and loyalty still exist in this world. They came because they remember. They remember what it means to serve, to sacrifice, and to stand up for those who can't stand up for themselves. They came because I helped their families decades ago, and they've never forgotten." Smoke added, "Margaret Hayes is a decorated Army nurse who served in Vietnam. She saved lives under fire, patched up wounded soldiers when she was exhausted and terrified, and she never asked for recognition. Today, she was treated like she was worthless by a judge who didn't bother to learn who she was. That's not right, and we're not going to stand by and let it happen." Cassidy scribbled notes furiously. "And Judge Bradford, what do you think about his handling of the case?" Smoke's jaw tightened. "Judge Bradford let his prejudices cloud his judgment. He saw an elderly woman asking for help and decided she was a burden instead of a hero. That kind of thinking has no place on the bench." The interview lasted another 10 minutes, and Cassidy promised to run the story in the next day's paper. As the reporter walked away, Luther Jackson turned to Margaret with a warm smile. "You did good in there, Miss Margaret. Real good. Now let's get you somewhere warm and figure out the next steps." The Iron Brotherhood had a clubhouse on the outskirts of Ridgewood, a converted warehouse with a garage bay, a meeting room, and a small kitchen. It wasn't fancy, but it was clean and welcoming. The walls were covered with photographs of fallen soldiers, American flags, and memorabilia from decades of service. Smoke led Margaret inside and guided her to a worn leather couch near a wood-burning stove. Within minutes, the other veterans were bringing her hot coffee, a blanket, and a plate of sandwiches. A man named Carl Bennett, who served as the club's treasurer, sat down across from her with a notepad. Carl was in his early 60s, with kind eyes and a salt and pepper mustache. "Miss Margaret, we want to help you get on your feet. First things first. Let's figure out what you need." Margaret felt tears threaten again, but she blinked them back. "I don't even know where to start," she admitted. "I've been trying to do this on my own for so long, I forgot what it's like to have help." Carl nodded. "Let's start simple. Housing. We've got 60 days to find you a safe, affordable place to live. I've got some connections with property owners in the area who might be willing to work with us." "What's your budget?" Margaret hesitated, embarrassed. "I get $873 a month from Social Security. Most of that goes to my medications and utilities. I've saved $230 from alterations, but that's it. Carl wrote it down without judgment. Okay, that's a starting point. We've also got a fund specifically for helping veterans and their families. It's not a lot, but it might cover a security deposit and first month's rent. We'll figure it out. Luther joined the conversation. What about work? You mentioned you do alterations. Is that something you enjoy? Margaret nodded. I do. I've been sewing since I was a girl. I worked at a factory for a while before I became a nurse. It's calming and I'm good at it. Mrs. Chen at the bridal shop gives me work when she can, but it's not consistent. Smoke leaned against the wall, arms crossed. What if we helped you set up a proper business? Get you some better equipment? Maybe advertise your services around town? There's always a need for alterations. Weddings, proms, suits for job interviews. You could build a steady client base. Margaret's eyes widened. I couldn't ask you to do that. You've already done so much. You're not asking, Smoke interrupted gently. We're offering. You've spent your whole life helping others. It's time someone helped you. The conversation continued late into the evening, and by the time one of the veterans, a man named Hector Ramirez, drove Margaret back to her trailer, a plan was beginning to take shape. The Iron Brotherhood would help her find housing, set up her sewing business, and connect her with resources she hadn't known existed. More than that, they would make sure she was never invisible again. That night, Margaret lay in her narrow bed in the trailer, listening to the wind rattle the windows. For the first time in months, she didn't feel afraid. The world was still uncertain, and the future was still unclear. But she was no longer facing it alone. Meanwhile, across town, Judge Richard Bradford sat in his home office staring at his computer screen. The article Cassidy Reynolds had written was already online, posted to the Ridgewood Daily Chronicle's website with the headline, Vietnam Nurse Mocked by Judge, Saved by Veteran Bikers. The story included a photo of Margaret surrounded by the Iron Brotherhood veterans on the courthouse steps, her face tearful but dignified. The comments section was already filling up with outrage. Disgraceful. A judge should know better. This woman is a hero and he treated her like trash. Bradford needs to be removed from the bench. The backlash was swift and unforgiving, and Bradford knew it was only the beginning. His phone buzzed. A text from his wife, Carolyn Bradford, who was out of town visiting her sister. What the hell is this article, Richard? Call me immediately. He ignored it and poured himself a scotch, his hands shaking. He had presided over thousands of cases during his 15 years on the bench, and he prided himself on his efficiency and no-nonsense approach. But today, he had made a mistake, a big one. The problem wasn't that he had ruled against Margaret Hayes. Eviction cases were straightforward, and property owners had rights. The problem was how he had treated her. The mockery, the condescension, the casual cruelty. He had let his frustration with the endless parade of sob stories harden him to the point where he couldn't see the person in front of him. And now the entire town knew it. His phone rang and the caller ID showed Chief Judge Harold Brennan. Bradford's stomach sank. He answered on the third ring. Judge Brennan. Richard, we need to talk. Brennan's voice was icy. I've been getting calls all evening about the Hayes case. The article is everywhere. Local news, social media, even picked up by a few regional outlets. People are calling for your resignation. Harold, I apologized in court. I granted her the postponement she requested. After you humiliated her in front of a packed courtroom, Brennan interrupted. Richard, you've been on thin ice for a while now, you know that. The complaints about your courtroom demeanor, the accusations of bias, this is the final straw. I'm recommending a formal review by the Judicial Standards Commission. Until that's completed, you're going to be under a microscope. Bradford felt his career teetering on the edge of a cliff. What do you want me to do? For starters, issue a public apology, a real one, not some half-hearted statement through a press release. And then you're going to figure out how to make this right with Mrs. Hayes. If she's willing to meet with you, you grovel. Understand?" Bradford closed his eyes. "I understand." The call ended, and he sat in silence, the weight of his actions pressing down on him. He had spent years building his reputation, and in one afternoon he had destroyed it. But more than that, he had hurt someone who didn't deserve it. And for the first time in a long time, Richard Bradford felt shame. The next morning, the Ridgewood Daily Chronicle hit doorsteps across the county, and the story went viral. By noon, national news outlets had picked it up. "Judge apologizes after mocking homeless veteran nurse," read one headline. "Biker veterans stand up for Vietnam hero facing eviction," read another. Margaret's phone, a cheap flip phone she kept for emergencies, started ringing with calls from reporters, advocacy groups, and strangers offering support. Smoke assigned 2 members of the Iron Brotherhood, Danny Miller, and a man named Travis Coleman, to help Margaret manage the sudden attention. Travis was a former Marine who now worked as a social worker, and he had experience navigating bureaucracy and media. "Miss Margaret, you don't have to talk to anyone you don't want to," Travis said gently. "But there are people out there who want to help. We just need to filter out the noise and find the genuine offers." One call stood out. A woman named Diane Fletcher, director of a non-profit organization called Homes for Heroes, which provided transitional housing for homeless veterans. Diane had read the article and was moved to action. "Mrs. Hayes, we have a small apartment available in one of our properties in Ridgewood. It's fully furnished, utilities included, and there's no rent for the first 6 months while you get back on your feet. After that, it's income-based. Would you be interested?" Margaret could barely believe what she was hearing. "Are you sure? I don't want to take something away from someone who needs it more." "Mrs. Hayes, you're exactly who we're here to serve," Diane said warmly. "You've given more than enough. Let us give back." By the end of the week, Margaret had signed a lease for the apartment, a cozy 1-bedroom in a quiet neighborhood near downtown Ridgewood. The Iron Brotherhood helped her move, bringing donated furniture, kitchen supplies, and even a better sewing machine, a modern Janot model purchased by the club's fundraising efforts. Mrs. Chen from the bridal shop stopped by with a basket of groceries and a promise of steady work. As Margaret stood in her new living room, surrounded by people who had become her family, she felt a profound sense of gratitude. "I don't know how to thank you all," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You've given me my life back." Smoke smiled, his gruff exterior softening. "You gave our families their lives, Miss Margaret. This is just us returning the favor. Besides, we're not going anywhere. You're part of Iron Brotherhood now, whether you ride a bike or not." Margaret laughed through her tears. "I think I'm a little old to learn how to ride a motorcycle." "Never too old," Luther said with a wink. "But we'll settle for you being our honorary member. You've earned your patch." That evening, as Margaret sat in her new home with a cup of tea, she thought about the journey that had brought her here. From the jungles of Vietnam, to the trailer in the mud, to this small apartment that felt like a palace. She had been broken down, humiliated, and abandoned. But she had also been lifted up, defended, and embraced. And she realized that this was what resilience looked like. Not the absence of falling, but the presence of people who help you stand back up. Judge Richard Bradford's world was unraveling. The day after the Ridgewood Daily Chronicle article went viral, his inbox was flooded with hundreds of emails, some expressing support, but the vast majority calling for his resignation or removal. By the end of the week, a Change.org petition titled "Remove Judge Bradford from the Bench" had garnered over 50,000 signatures. Local activists, veteran advocacy groups, and civil rights organizations were demanding accountability. The Judicial Standards Commission of North Carolina officially opened an investigation into Bradford's conduct, a process that could take months and potentially result in public censure, suspension, or even disbarment. In the meantime, Chief Judge Harold Brennan reassigned Bradford's caseload to other judges and placed him on administrative leave. Bradford was effectively sidelined, watching his career crumble from the sidelines. Carolyn Bradford returned from her sister's house and confronted her husband in their upscale home in the Ridgewood Estate subdivision. Carolyn was a sharp woman in her early 50s, a real estate agent with a commanding presence and little patience for incompetence. "Richard, do you understand what you've done?" she demanded, standing in the doorway of his office. "My phone hasn't stopped ringing. Clients are asking if they should find another agent because they don't want to be associated with me. My business is suffering because of your arrogance." Bradford looked up from his desk, exhausted. "I made a mistake, Carolyn. I've acknowledged that. I apologized in court." "A half-hearted apology that came only after those bikers embarrassed you," Carolyn shot back. "You humiliated an elderly veteran, Richard, a woman who served her country and saved lives. And you did it because you were having a bad day and wanted to feel powerful. That's not a mistake. That's a character flaw." The words stung because they were true. Bradford had spent years justifying his harsh demeanor as necessary for maintaining order in the courtroom, but the truth was simpler and uglier. He had become callous. He had stopped seeing the people who appeared before him as individuals with stories, struggles, and dignity. They had become case numbers, obstacles to efficiency, burdens on his time. "What do you want me to do?" he asked quietly. Carolyn crossed her arms. "You need to make this right. Not for your career, not for your reputation, but because it's the right thing to do. That woman deserves more than a courtroom apology. She deserves to know that you see her as a human being." Bradford nodded slowly. "I'll reach out to her." "Good. And Richard, if you don't fix this, I'm not sure I can stay in this marriage. I didn't sign up to be married to someone who bullies vulnerable people." She left the room, and Bradford sat alone with the weight of her words. His marriage, his career, his reputation, all of it was hanging by a thread. And the person who held the power to cut that thread was a 68-year-old woman he had mocked without a second thought. Margaret's life, meanwhile, had transformed in ways she never imagined. The Iron Brotherhood had not only helped her secure housing, but had also connected her with a steady stream of clients for her sewing business. Word spread quickly that Margaret Hayes, the Vietnam veteran nurse, was offering alterations and custom sewing services. Orders poured in, hemming pants, taking in dresses, repairing jackets. Margaret worked from dawn until late evening, her hands moving over fabric with the same precision she had once used to stitch wounds in a field hospital. One afternoon, as Margaret sat at her sewing machine working on a wedding dress alteration, there was a knock at her door. She set down her work and opened it to find Travis Coleman, the Marine veteran who had helped her manage the media attention. Travis looked uncomfortable. "Miss Margaret, I've got something to tell you and you're not going to like it." Margaret gestured for him to come in. "What is it?" Travis sat down on the couch, his hands clasped between his knees. "Judge Bradford has been trying to reach you. He wants to apologize in person. He's called me, Smoke, even the non-profit that helped you get this place. He says he wants to make things right." Margaret's expression hardened. "I don't want to see him." "I understand," Travis said gently. "And no one's going to force you. But I thought you should know. He's also facing an investigation, and his career is pretty much over. Some people think he's just trying to save himself, but I don't know. Maybe he genuinely feels bad. Either way, the choice is yours." Margaret turned back to her sewing machine, her hands trembling slightly. That man stood in front of a courtroom full of people and made me feel like I was nothing. He mocked my life, my choices, my struggles, and now he wants forgiveness because his career is in trouble? I don't owe him anything. Travis nodded. "You're absolutely right. you don't. But I've learned something over the years. Holding on to anger is like carrying a heavy pack on a long march. Eventually, it wears you down. I'm not saying you have to forgive him. I'm just saying that sometimes letting someone apologize isn't about them. It's about you. Margaret didn't respond immediately. She thought about the weight she had carried for so long, the abandonment by her children, the loneliness, the fear. Travis was right. She was tired of carrying anger. But forgiveness wasn't something she could manufacture on demand. It had to be earned. If he wants to apologize, he can do it, Margaret said finally. But I'm not making it easy for him, and I'm not doing it alone. I want Smoke and Luther there with me. Travis smiled. I'll set it up. The meeting was arranged for the following Saturday at the Iron Brotherhood Clubhouse. Judge Bradford arrived precisely on time, dressed in casual clothes rather than his usual suit. He looked smaller somehow, diminished, as if the weight of public scrutiny had physically shrunk him. Smoke and Luther stood on either side of Margaret, their presence a clear message. She was not alone, and Bradford would answer to all of them. Bradford cleared his throat, his voice lacking its usual authority. Mrs. Hayes, thank you for agreeing to meet with me. I know I don't deserve your time, but I'm grateful for it. Margaret said nothing, her hands folded in her lap. Her silence was more powerful than any words. Bradford continued, his discomfort evident. What I did in that courtroom was inexcusable. I let my frustrations and biases cloud my judgment, and I treated you with cruelty and disrespect. I didn't take the time to learn who you were, what you'd been through, or what you'd given to this country. I saw you as an inconvenience, and I'm ashamed of that. Smoke's voice was cold. You should be. You had the power to show compassion, and instead you chose to humiliate her. Why? Bradford met Smoke's gaze, and for the first time, there was honesty in his eyes. Because I stopped seeing people. Somewhere along the way, I convinced myself that being a good judge meant being harsh, efficient, unsentimental. I told myself that sob stories were manipulations, that people who ended up in my courtroom had only themselves to blame. I was wrong, and I'm sorry. Margaret finally spoke, her voice steady but laced with pain. Do you know what it's like to feel invisible, to walk through the world and have people look right through you like you don't matter? That's how I've felt for years. My own children abandoned me, strangers ignored me, and then I stood in your courtroom asking for a small mercy, and you laughed at me. You made me feel worthless. Bradford's eyes glistened with unshed tears. I know, and I can't undo that. But I want to try to make it right. If there's anything I can do, anything at all, please tell me. Margaret looked at Smoke and Luther, drawing strength from their presence. Then she turned back to Bradford. There is something you can do. Use your position, whatever's left of it, to advocate for people like me, veterans who fall through the cracks, elderly people who are ignored and dismissed, homeless individuals who are treated like burdens instead of human beings. If you really want to make things right, don't just apologize to me. Change the way you see the world. Bradford nodded, his voice thick. I will. I promise. Margaret stood, signaling that the meeting was over. I can't say I forgive you, Judge Bradford. Not yet. But I hope you become a better person because of this. I hope you learn to see people again. Bradford left the clubhouse a different man than when he entered. Whether that change would last, only time would tell. But Margaret had spoken her truth, and in doing so, she had reclaimed a piece of her dignity. As the weeks passed, Margaret's sewing business flourished. She hired a young woman named Emily Torres, a single mother struggling to make ends meet, as her assistant. Emily had learned basic sewing from her grandmother, and Margaret took her under her wing, teaching her advanced techniques while offering her steady work and fair pay. The two women formed a bond, and Emily often brought her 5-year-old daughter, Sophia, to the apartment. Sophia would sit on the floor, coloring pictures and chattering away while Margaret and Emily worked. The Iron Brotherhood continued to check on Margaret regularly, but they also gave her space to rebuild her life on her own terms. Smoke stopped by one evening with a folder in his hand. "Miss Margaret, I've got something for you." He opened the folder to reveal a framed certificate and a medal, a Vietnam Service Medal, and a commendation letter from the Department of Defense, recognizing her service as an Army nurse. "We did some digging through military records," Smoke explained. "You earned these, but they were never properly awarded. We got them reissued. You deserve to have them." Margaret stared at the medal, her fingers trembling as she touched the ribbon. "I didn't serve for medals," she said softly. "I served because it was the right thing to do." "I know," Smoke said, "but you still earned them, and people should know what you did." Margaret hung the framed certificate on the wall of her apartment, a quiet testament to a life of service. And as she looked at it, she realized that her story wasn't defined by the people who had abandoned her or the judge who had mocked her. It was defined by the moments when she had chosen compassion over bitterness, service over self-interest, and hope over despair. By mid-December, Ridgewood had been transformed by Margaret's story. The article written by Cassidy Reynolds had sparked a broader conversation about how society treats its veterans and elderly citizens. Local churches, community organizations, and businesses began organizing fundraisers and support networks for vulnerable populations. The Iron Brotherhood partnered with Homes for Heroes to expand their transitional housing program, and several property owners in Ridgewood offered discounted rent to veterans in need. Margaret found herself at the center of this movement, though she never sought the attention. She was invited to speak at a town hall meeting organized by the Ridgewood Veterans Affairs Office, an event attended by over 300 people. Standing at the podium, Margaret felt a wave of nervousness, but Smoke and Luther sat in the front row, their presence a steady anchor. "I never thought of myself as special," Margaret began, her voice soft but clear. "I was just a nurse doing my job. But I've learned something these past few weeks. No one should have to fight their battles alone. I was drowning, and people I didn't even know threw me a lifeline. That's what community is. That's what it means to take care of each other." The audience erupted in applause, and several people stood, wiping tears from their eyes. After the meeting, Margaret was approached by a representative from the North Carolina Department of Veterans Affairs, a woman named Dr. Sharon Mitchell, who offered to help Margaret navigate the VA system to access benefits she hadn't known she was eligible for, including increased disability compensation for her arthritis and hip issues related to her military service. "You've been leaving money on the table, Mrs. Hayes," Dr. Mitchell explained kindly. "Let's fix that." Within a month, Margaret's monthly income increased significantly, providing her with financial stability she hadn't experienced in years. She was able to expand her sewing business, purchasing higher quality materials, and even creating a small website with the help of Emily's teenage cousin, who was studying web design. The website featured photos of Margaret's work, testimonials from satisfied clients, and a brief biography that mentioned her military service. Orders came in from across the state. Margaret also began volunteering at the local VA clinic 2 afternoons a week, offering support to veterans navigating the healthcare system. She would sit with them, listen to their stories, and advocate on their behalf when they felt overwhelmed or dismissed. It was a return to the work she had always loved, caring for those who had served. One afternoon in late December, as Margaret was leaving the VA clinic, she was approached by a young man in his early 30s with shaggy brown hair and a nervous demeanor. He wore a faded army jacket and carried a backpack that looked like it held everything he owned. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said hesitantly. "Are you Margaret Hayes?" Margaret nodded. "I am. Can I help you?" The young man's eyes filled with tears. "My name is Kevin Hayes. I'm your grandson." Margaret felt the world tilt. "Kevin? Patricia's son?" Kevin nodded, his voice breaking. I saw the article about you online. Mom never told me what happened to you. She said you moved to Florida to live with friends. I didn't know you were here, didn't know you were struggling. When I saw the article, I had to find you. Margaret's hands flew to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Oh, Kevin, I haven't seen you since you were 10 years old. Kevin stepped forward, and Margaret pulled him into a tight embrace, both of them sobbing. I'm so sorry, Grandma, Kevin whispered. I should have looked for you sooner. I should have known something was wrong. They sat on a bench outside the clinic, and Kevin explained that he had joined the army at 18, served 2 tours in Afghanistan, and had been discharged with PTSD 3 years earlier. He had struggled with addiction and homelessness, bouncing between shelters and friends' couches. His relationship with his mother, Patricia, had deteriorated, and they hadn't spoken in over a year. When I saw what she did to you, abandoning you like that, I couldn't believe it, Kevin said bitterly. She always acted like she was so successful, so put together. I didn't know she was capable of that kind of cruelty. Margaret took Kevin's hand. Your mother is dealing with her own struggles, Kevin. I don't understand her choices, and they hurt me deeply. But I don't want you to carry anger toward her. That will only hurt you. Kevin looked at his grandmother with a mixture of admiration and disbelief. How can you say that after what she did? Margaret smiled sadly. Because I've learned that holding on to anger is exhausting. I'd rather spend my energy on the people who are here, who care, who want to be part of my life. And right now, that includes you. Kevin broke down again, and Margaret held him, rocking him gently the way she had when he was a child. You're going to be okay, she whispered. We're going to figure this out together. Margaret brought Kevin to meet the Iron Brotherhood, and Smoke immediately took the young veteran under his wing. You served your country and your family to Miss Margaret, Smoke said. That makes you family to us. We're going to get you the help you need. The Iron Brotherhood connected Kevin with a counselor who specialized in PTSD, helped him enroll in a VA program for job training, and found him a spot in transitional housing at one of the Homes for Heroes properties. Kevin began attending therapy regularly, participating in group sessions with other veterans, and slowly rebuilding his life. He also started working with Margaret in her sewing business, handling deliveries, managing orders, and learning basic repairs. The relationship between grandmother and grandson blossomed, filling a void in both of their lives. Margaret taught Kevin how to cook her famous chicken and dumplings, and Kevin introduced her to modern technology, setting up a smartphone for her and teaching her how to use social media. Margaret was hesitant at first, but she quickly discovered the joy of reconnecting with old friends and sharing updates about her life. On Christmas Eve, Margaret hosted a small dinner at her apartment. The guests included Kevin, Smoke, Luther, Travis, Emily, and her daughter Sophia, Mrs. Chen from the bridal shop, and Cassidy Reynolds, the reporter who had written the article that changed everything. The apartment was filled with laughter, the smell of roasting turkey, and the warmth of people who had become family. As they sat around the table, Smoke raised his glass. I want to propose a toast. To Miss Margaret Hayes, a woman who taught us all what it means to serve, to endure, and to never give up. You've been through hell, Mom, and you came out the other side with your dignity and compassion intact. You're a hero, and we're honored to know you. Everyone raised their glasses, and Margaret felt a swell of emotion so powerful she could barely speak. I'm the one who's honored, she said softly. You all saved my life. You gave me hope when I had none, and you reminded me that I'm not alone. I will never forget that. Later that evening, as the guests began to leave, Kevin pulled Margaret aside. Grandma, I've been thinking, I want to reach out to Mom. Not to forgive her, not yet, but to tell her what she's missing. To tell her about the incredible person you are and how much she's lost by walking away. Maybe it won't change anything, but I have to try." Margaret touched Kevin's cheek. "Do what feels right, sweetheart. But don't do it for me. Do it for you. And remember, whatever happens, you have a family now. You're never going to be alone again." Kevin hugged her tightly. "Neither are you, Grandma. Neither are you." Across town, Judge Richard Bradford sat alone in his study on Christmas Eve. The house was quiet. Carolyn was spending the holiday with her sister, and their relationship remained strained. The Judicial Standards Commission's investigation was ongoing, and Bradford had no illusions about the outcome. His career was over, and he had accepted that. But something had shifted in Bradford during the past few weeks. He had begun volunteering at a legal aid clinic, offering free consultations to low-income individuals navigating the court system. He had started attending community meetings, listening to the stories of people he had once dismissed as cases. And he had reached out to several veterans organizations, offering to advocate for policy changes that would protect vulnerable populations from the kind of treatment he had inflicted on Margaret Hayes. It wasn't redemption. Not yet. Redemption, Bradford had learned, wasn't something you declared. It was something you earned through years of consistent, humble action. But it was a start. And for the first time in his life, Richard Bradford understood that being a good person mattered more than being a powerful one. He opened his laptop and began drafting an op-ed for the Ridgewood Daily Chronicle, titled "What I Learned from Margaret Hayes." In it, he detailed his failures, his biases, and the lessons he had learned from being publicly confronted with his cruelty. He wrote about the importance of seeing people as individuals, of leading with compassion, and of recognizing that everyone who appears in a courtroom carries a story worthy of respect. When he finished, he sent the draft to Cassidy Reynolds, asking her to review it before publication. "I want to make sure this is honest," he wrote in the email. "I want to make sure it helps, not hurts." Cassidy replied within an hour. "It's honest, Judge, and I think it will help. But the real test isn't whether people read it, it's whether you live it." Bradford stared at those words for a long time. Then he closed his laptop, turned off the lights, and sat in the darkness, contemplating the long road ahead. Spring arrived in Ridgewood with a burst of color. Dogwood trees bloomed white and pink along the streets. Azaleas lined the sidewalks, and the air smelled of fresh grass and rain. Margaret's life had settled into a rhythm that felt both foreign and wonderful. Her sewing business was thriving. Kevin was attending community college while working part-time at a local hardware store, and the Iron Brotherhood had become her extended family. But there was one piece of unfinished business that weighed on Margaret's heart: Patricia. Kevin had reached out to his mother in January, sending her a long email detailing everything that had happened: the eviction hearing, the humiliation, the intervention by the veterans, and Margaret's remarkable resilience. Patricia hadn't responded. Kevin tried calling, but her number went to voicemail. He even drove to Charlotte to the address he had for her, only to find that she and her husband had moved without leaving forwarding information. "I'm sorry, Grandma," Kevin had said, his frustration evident. "I tried. She doesn't want to be found." Margaret had accepted it with the same quiet grace she approached everything. "People make their choices, Kevin. Your mother is living with hers. All we can do is live with ours." But in late March, everything changed. Margaret received a letter postmarked from Charlotte with no return address. Her hands trembled as she opened it. "Dear Mom, I don't know how to start this letter, so I'm just going to say it. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for abandoning you. I'm sorry for lying about where you were. I'm sorry for being too ashamed to admit that I couldn't take care of you when you needed me most." Kevin sent me the article about what happened in court. I've read it a dozen times, and every time I feel sicker. I let you down in the worst possible way. I told myself that leaving you in that trailer was temporary, that Daniel and I would figure things out and come get you. But the truth is, I was overwhelmed. Daniel lost his job, we were drowning in debt, and I was too proud to ask for help. I convinced myself that you'd be fine, that you were strong enough to handle it. I was wrong. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve it, but I needed you to know that I see what I did, and I'm ashamed. You raised me to be better than that. You taught me to be kind, to be strong, to help others. And I failed you. If you're willing, I'd like to see you. I'd like to try to make things right, even though I know I can't undo the harm I've caused. But if you don't want to see me, I'll understand. I'll respect that. I love you, Mom. I always have, even when I didn't show it. Patricia. Margaret read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. She felt a complicated mix of emotions: relief, anger, sadness, and something that might have been hope. She showed the letter to Kevin, who read it with a grim expression. "What do you want to do?" Kevin asked. Margaret folded the letter carefully. "I want to see her, but not alone. I want you there, and I want Smoke there too." Kevin nodded. "We'll be with you, Grandma, whatever you need." The meeting was arranged for a Saturday afternoon at Margaret's apartment. Patricia arrived precisely at 2 o'clock, looking older than Margaret remembered. Her daughter was 52 now, her once dark hair streaked with grey, her face lined with stress. She wore a simple blouse and jeans, and her hands shook as she stood in the doorway. "Hi, Mom," Patricia said, her voice barely above a whisper. Margaret gestured for her to come in. Smoke and Kevin sat on the couch, their presence a silent reminder that Margaret was not without protection. Patricia glanced at them nervously but said nothing. She sat in the chair across from Margaret, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. For a long moment no one spoke. Then Patricia broke the silence. "I don't know what to say except that I'm sorry. I failed you, and there's no excuse for that." Margaret's voice was calm but firm. "You didn't just fail me, Patricia, you abandoned me. You left me in a trailer with no heat, no support, and no way to reach you. You told Kevin I had moved to Florida. You erased me from your life because it was easier than dealing with the reality of my situation. Do you understand how much that hurt?" Patricia's face crumpled and she began to cry. I know, and I'm so sorry. I was drowning, Mom. Daniel and I were fighting all the time. Money was tight and I didn't know how to help you. I told myself that you were tough, that you'd figure it out. But the truth is, I was a coward. I was ashamed that I couldn't take care of you, and instead of asking for help, I just walked away. Kevin leaned forward, his voice hard. "Do you know what Grandma went through because of you? She was almost thrown on the street. She was humiliated in court. She's 68 years old, Mom, and she was eating 1 meal a day to afford her medications. Where were you?" Patricia sobbed openly now. I don't know where I was. I was lost, and I'm so sorry." Margaret let her daughter cry for a moment, then spoke. "Patricia, I'm not going to pretend that what you did is okay. It's not. But I'm also not going to spend the rest of my life hating you. That would only hurt me. So here's what's going to happen. If you want to be part of my life again, you have to earn it. You have to show up. Not just today, but consistently. You have to rebuild trust. And that takes time. Can you do that?" Patricia looked up, her eyes red and swollen. "Yes, I'll do whatever it takes, Mom, I swear." Margaret nodded. "Then we'll start here, small steps, and we'll see where it goes." The meeting lasted another hour, with Patricia sharing the struggles she and her husband had faced. The job loss, the mounting debt, the shame of failure. It didn't excuse her actions, but it provided context. By the end, Patricia and Kevin had a cautious but civil exchange, and Patricia promised to attend family counseling sessions to work through the damage that had been done. As Patricia was leaving, she turned to Smoke, who had remained silent throughout. "Thank you for protecting my mother," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I should have been the one doing that. I'm grateful you were there when I wasn't." Smoke's expression was unreadable. "Your mother is a hero, Mom. She deserved better than what she got from you. Don't waste this second chance." Patricia nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I won't." The months that followed were a slow process of healing. Patricia visited Margaret every other weekend, bringing groceries, helping with errands, and gradually rebuilding the relationship that had been fractured. It wasn't easy. There were difficult conversations, moments of tension, and tears on both sides. But Margaret had learned that forgiveness wasn't a single act. It was a choice made over and over again. Kevin continued to thrive, finding stability in his work and his therapy. He and Patricia attended several counseling sessions together, working through their own complicated relationship. It would take time, but both were committed to the effort. The Iron Brotherhood remained a constant presence in Margaret's life, celebrating her milestones and supporting her through challenges. In May, the club organized a ceremony at the Ridgewood Veterans Memorial, where Margaret was officially recognized for her service in Vietnam. The mayor of Ridgewood, a woman named Angela Simmons, presented Margaret with a plaque honoring her contributions, and over 200 community members attended, including veterans, students, and families. As Margaret stood at the podium, looking out at the crowd, she felt a sense of completion. "I spent a lot of years feeling invisible," she said, her voice strong. "I felt forgotten, abandoned, and worthless. But this community showed me that I was wrong. You reminded me that service matters, that people matter, and that we all have the power to lift each other up. Thank you for giving me my life back. Thank you for seeing me." The applause was thunderous, and as Margaret stepped down from the podium, Smoke was waiting for her, a leather vest in his hands. It was an Iron Brotherhood vest, customized with a patch that read "Honorary Member" and another that said "Vietnam, 1969-1971. "You've earned this, Miss Margaret," Smoke said, his voice gruff with emotion. "Welcome to the Brotherhood." Margaret put on the vest, tears streaming down her face, and the crowd erupted in cheers. Kevin rushed forward and hugged her tightly, and even Patricia, standing at the edge of the crowd, was crying. As summer settled over Ridgewood, Margaret's sewing business continued to grow. She had trained Emily to handle most of the day-to-day work, and Emily had become skilled enough to take on her own clients. Margaret spent more time volunteering at the VA clinic and mentoring young veterans who were struggling to transition back to civilian life. She had found her purpose again, and it filled her with a sense of peace she hadn't felt in years. One evening in late June, Margaret sat on the small porch of her apartment, sipping iced tea and watching the sunset. Kevin was inside, cooking dinner, and the sounds of laughter drifted through the open window. Smoke pulled up on his motorcycle, the rumble of the engine announcing his arrival. He parked and walked over, sitting down in the chair beside her. "Evening, Miss Margaret," he said with a smile. "Evening, Smoke. To what do I owe the pleasure?" Smoke pulled an envelope from his vest pocket and handed it to her. "This came to the clubhouse. It's addressed to you." Margaret opened the envelope and found a handwritten letter from Judge Richard Bradford. It was short and to the point. "Dear Mrs. Hayes, I wanted you to know that the Judicial Standards Commission has completed its review, and I have resigned from the bench, effective immediately. It was the right decision. I've spent the past 6 months volunteering with legal aid organizations and advocating for policy changes to protect vulnerable populations in the court system. It doesn't undo what I did, but it's a start. Thank you for meeting with me. Thank you for giving me the chance to apologize. You taught me more about dignity and grace in one conversation than I learned in 15 years on the bench. I hope you're well. I hope you're surrounded by people who see you for the remarkable person you are. With deep respect, Richard Bradford." Margaret folded the letter and tucked it back into the envelope. "He resigned." Smoke nodded. "Good. He didn't belong on that bench." Margaret looked out at the sunset, her expression thoughtful. "I think he's trying to become a better person. I hope he succeeds." Smoke studied her for a moment. "You're too kind, Miss Margaret." She smiled. "No, I'm just tired of carrying anger. I'd rather spend my energy on the people I love." They sat in comfortable silence, watching as the sky turned from orange to purple to deep blue. Inside, Kevin called out that dinner was ready, and Margaret stood, her joints protesting slightly but her spirit strong. "You coming, Smoke?" she asked. "Wouldn't miss it," he replied, standing up and following her inside. As they gathered around the small dining table, Margaret, Kevin, Smoke, and the family they had built from broken pieces, Margaret said a quiet prayer of gratitude. Not for the hardships she had endured, but for the people who had walked into her life when she needed them most. People who reminded her that even in the darkest moments, there is always light to be found. The road ahead was uncertain, as all roads are. But Margaret Eleanor Hayes knew one thing for certain: she would never walk it alone again. 2 years later, Margaret stood at the grand opening of the Eleanor Hayes Veteran Support Center, a facility funded by donations from across North Carolina and beyond. The center offered transitional housing, job training, mental health services, and a community space for veterans and their families. It was located in a renovated building downtown Ridgewood, with large windows that let in natural light and a memorial garden out back honoring fallen soldiers. The Iron Brotherhood had spearheaded the fundraising effort, organizing charity rides, benefit concerts, and community events. Kevin had worked tirelessly alongside them, using his own story of recovery to inspire others. Patricia had even contributed, volunteering her time and skills to help with administrative work, slowly earning back the trust she had lost. At the ribbon-cutting ceremony, Margaret stood at the podium once more, this time flanked by Smoke, Luther, Kevin, and representatives from veteran organizations across the state. The crowd numbered in the hundreds, veterans, families, community leaders, and journalists documenting the moment. "This center isn't named after me because I did something special," Margaret said, her voice carrying across the crowd. "It's named after me because of what you all did for me. You saw a woman who was invisible and made her visible. You saw someone who was forgotten and chose to remember. This center is a promise that no veteran will ever be invisible again, that no one who served this country will be abandoned or forgotten. We are stronger together, and together we will make sure every veteran knows they matter." The ribbon was cut to thunderous applause, and the doors opened to welcome the first residents, veterans who, like Margaret, had fallen through the cracks, but were now being given a second chance. Inside, the walls were decorated with photographs of service members, American flags, and a large portrait of Margaret in her Army nurse uniform from 1969, a reminder of where it all began. As the celebration continued, Judge Richard Bradford approached from the edge of the crowd. He had kept his distance, respecting Margaret's space, but she saw him and nodded. He walked over, his expression humble. "Mrs. Hayes, congratulations," he said quietly. "This is remarkable." Margaret studied him for a moment. Over the past 2 years, Bradford had made good on his promise. He had worked with legal aid organizations, advocated for policy reforms, and used his story as a cautionary tale about the dangers of judicial arrogance. He would never be a judge again, but he had become something perhaps more important, a voice for those without one. "Thank you, Judge Bradford," Margaret said. "I hear you've been doing good work." Bradford nodded. "I'm trying. Every day I'm trying to be better than I was. Thank you for giving me the chance to learn that." Margaret extended her hand, and Bradford shook it, a gesture of closure and perhaps forgiveness. "We all deserve second chances," Margaret said. "What matters is what we do with them." As the sun set over Ridgewood that evening, Margaret stood in the memorial garden of the center, surrounded by the people who had become her family. Smoke handed her a leather-bound journal. "We thought you might want to write your story down, Miss Margaret, for future generations, so they know what real strength looks like. Margaret took the journal, running her fingers over the embossed cover. "I'll think about it," she said with a smile. "But right now, I'd rather live my story than write it." Smoke laughed. "Fair enough, but when you're ready, we'll be here to help." Kevin wrapped his arm around his grandmother's shoulders. "I'm proud of you, Grandma. I'm proud to be your grandson." Margaret leaned into him, her heart full. "And I'm proud of you, sweetheart. Look how far we've both come." As the Iron Brotherhood fired up their motorcycles and prepared to ride into the night, Margaret watched them go, their engines roaring like thunder, their brotherhood unbreakable. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, from the battlefields of Vietnam to the trailer in the mud to this moment of triumph and purpose. Life had tested her, broken her, and built her back up again. But through it all, she had never lost the one thing that mattered most: her humanity, her compassion, and her belief that people are worth fighting for. Margaret Eleanor Hayes had been abandoned, mocked, and dismissed. But she had also been saved, celebrated, and honored. And in the end, her story wasn't about falling, it was about rising, again and again, with the help of those who refused to let anyone be left behind. The motorcycles disappeared into the distance, their lights twinkling like stars. Margaret turned back toward the center, where veterans were settling into their new homes, finding community, and beginning their own journeys toward healing. She smiled, knowing that her work was far from over. But for the first time in her life, Margaret felt truly at peace, because she had learned the most important lesson of all: no one fights alone. And as long as there were people willing to stand together, to lift each other up, and to remember that every person has value, there would always be hope.